Welcome back, Season 5 of the podcast. So we're talking about this navigating the future of work today. We know that people, more than ever right now, want culture more than anything else with their jobs. There have been others that have realized that they actually love and have thrived in this environment of being able to work remotely. They feel that they have been more effective. They've been more productive, and their life has been more enriched by this ability to work remotely. We also know that it's going to be critical for us as leaders, teams, and organizations to continue to be proactive about how we engage the minds and hearts of our people, and that is going to require us to think about and be creative and name and plan specific time where we do get everybody in the same space, that we're going to have to continue to get better at leveraging virtual meetings, virtual experiences.
Welcome back to The Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced. The best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world.
Hey everyone, Jason Barger here, and welcome back to the Thermostat Podcast. I hope you have had an amazing summer. The summer's not over, so I hope you're still enjoying it, but I hope you've had a chance to step back, a few weeks at least to rest, to recover, to step back, to maybe enter into a new pattern. Certainly with everything that's been happening in the world over the last 18 months or so, I hope, and as you've heard me say on this podcast, urging you to take some time to rest, to step back, to allow ourselves to heal, to recover, to think, and allow ourselves so that we're actually better at everything else that we do in our lives and in our work. I hope you are continuing to find time this summer to do that. Here we are. Welcome back. Season 5 of the podcast is upon us. Hard to believe that we are already at Season 5. And it's a great celebration. It's a great celebration. So if you are a listener that's been with us from the very beginning, thank you so much and welcome back. So glad that you continue to stay with the podcast and it continues to add value to your life and your work. Thank you for being here. And really, as we reflect back on Seasons 1, the kickoff of this podcast, what amazing stuff, and amazing thought leaders that have joined me on this podcast over the first few seasons. Great episodes of nuggets and things to help us as we step back and think about our own leadership, to think about the culture that we're trying to create with the people around us, the teams and organizations we serve. And certainly think about how we navigate our way through the world. So Seasons 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now we have 80-plus episodes, again, which is so hard to imagine, but really been great journey along the way. And so glad those of you that have been with us along the way, again, thank you, thank you, thank you. For those of you that are joining now and just jumping into this, I really invite you to go back to enjoy some of the earlier episodes, because I think you're going to see that the spirit, the content, everything that we've talked about to this point is going to add value and contribute to wherever you might be. But here we are. And again, thank you for everybody that's jumping in right now. We're at Season 5 and beginning the next part of this journey. So the 80-plus episodes we are building upon. As always, I want this to be a place. This is going to be a place, a space for you in your own personal life, but then certainly within your career to step back, to think. I want this to be a positive place that kind of breathes oxygen into you as a human being, but also helps you to make sense of some things that are happening around you and how you're showing up and leading in your life and certainly in your career, but also the culture that you're creating with the people around you. So I hope this continues to be a place to do that for you. The energy on these podcasts continues to grow. There's great excitement, the growth that this continues to be. So thank you for everybody that's a part of it. I'm more convinced of this than ever. I continue to be this. The more research, the more study, the more observation, and certainly the more experience that I have with teams and organizations around the world. I'm more convinced of this than ever, that authentic leadership and creating compelling cultures are as needed now as ever in the world. We need people that are authentically leading and creating cultures that people want to be a part of. So thank you again for being a part of this journey, and I want this to be a place that's helping you kind of calibrate your own thermostat and the way that you enter your life and your work in the world. Thank you for being back. If you're willing to do me a quick favor, I am thankful and grateful for anybody that's willing to just pause for a second to do me a quick favor. Would take a minute to rate this podcast, to leave a positive review. If you can do 5 stars and leave a positive review, that is the way, whether we like it or not, that's the way that this content gets shared and amplified across the platform. So every time you do that, it makes it more accessible for anybody else to find this podcast. So thank you for everybody that takes the time to do that. I appreciate that more than you know. That's just the way, again, this works. So thank you for everybody to do it. Also, thank you for anybody out there that invites other people to be a part of this, shares this. That's the other organic way that these messages spread, is by people, great people like you that are listening, that say to the people in your organization, on your team, in your life, that say, hey, here's a podcast, a quick podcast that helps add value and contribute to your life and your mindset and the way you're thinking about leadership and culture and just navigating your way through life. So thank you for everybody who helps amplify the messages on this podcast. In today's episode, we're talking about navigating the future of work. Navigating the future of work. There's been all this talk about this quote-unquote the future of work and the way that work is evolving, certainly over the last 18 months. But today we're going to be talking about navigating the future of work as companies around the globe have been transitioning quote-unquote back to work. We're still in this new era of remote work, of in-person experiences, and navigating the work-life balance without losing performance and results. We're in this space where every team, company, organization, and human on the planet is now we're renegotiating and we're re-navigating this time of how do we leverage remote work, but also how do we create powerful in-person experiences so that we don't lose that human connection? And also, how do we keep work-life balance? I think there's been some great conversations that have emerged over how do we come out of this post-pandemic haul and be more thoughtful about work-life balance. And all of these things are important things to talk about, but also at the heart of this, of course, every team and organization and company will tell you, we also need to make sure that results continue and performance continues to hit the goals and the missions for why we exist, or else we won't exist as a company. So we're having to navigate our way through this idea of the future of work and how leaders and cultures navigate their way through these times will define not only them, but also define the future that they are creating as individuals, as teams, and as entire organizations and companies. So today we're talking about navigating that quote-unquote future of work. And so you've heard this phrase a lot lately. You've heard this phrase, the future of work. Many people are talking about it. Articles are being written about it. Everyone's talking about what is this all going to mean and how is the future of work going to evolve and what is it going to look like? What's it going to feel like? What is the best practices that places are going to discover? And what I will just first share about this idea of the future of work is for us to just step back and realize that the future of work is still being defined. We don't know exactly what it is going to be. So there are many people out there that are forecasting what it's going to look like, what it's going to mean, and certainly there are many trends and observations and experiences that many of us are having that I think we have good data in order to be able to forecast what we think it's going to look like. But the reality is that it's still being defined. This idea of the future of work, we are still in this space where the future of work is going to still be defined, it's going to still be discovered, and it still is going to be imagined. We are still in a space, we've certainly had a lot of trauma that's happened over the last 18 months, not only the pandemic, but issues of social justice and systematic racism, certainly the global and economic uncertainty and political uncertainty. There's been all kinds of things that have brought on some trauma. And so many organizations and teams and leaders are still reimagining, what does this future of work look like? How can we continue to raise the bar on a level of effectiveness and the outcomes that we're trying to produce towards the missions of why we exist, but at the same time, not just the results, but how do we create cultures where people want to be a part of them, that care for human beings, bring out the best in every individual's skill set, but also their own personal life, supports people so that they can have the lives, the families, the friendships, the lives that they want to have. And oh, by the way, continue to be better at whatever it is that we do. And so this idea of the future of work is still being defined. It's still being discovered, and it certainly is still being imagined. But there are some things that we know, at this stage in the game. We know this because we know it from research. We know it from study. We also know it from personal experience, and we know it from, certainly I know it and have felt it through the conversations that I've had across teams and organizations around the globe. And the reality is, these are some things that we know. We know that people, more than ever right now, want culture more than anything else with their jobs. In fact, the research tells us that 9 out of every 10 people say they would take a pay cut, they would take a reduced salary in order to work in an environment, a culture that was a more meaningful work environment. We know this. The research is telling us this, that people are saying this, that, hey, all things can, being equal, or 2 jobs or 3 jobs that they are considering, all of them being, roughly around the same amount of pay, or in some cases, maybe even a little bit less, that people are willing to take even less money to be a part of a culture that creates more meaning for them. More meaning is defined by them feeling like they are a contributor into something that's greater than themselves, that they feel like they as a person are valued, appreciated, that the company and organization has their best interest in mind too, and that they are a co-creator, a participant in a culture that's bigger than them, that there's a mission that's compelling to them, and they get to be a part of creating that moment by moment every single day. So we know this. We know that right now in the world, and I believe this has always been the case, but right now it's even more true, that people want culture more than anything else. We know that engaging of the mind and the heart of our people, engaging the minds and hearts of our people, is a huge component to performance. We're starting to realize this more and more. Again, I think we've always known it, but we're starting, the research and the data again is beginning to reveal this to us even more. This connection between when we are more engaged in our mind and in our heart, our performance actually increases. And so in a time when many people have coming out of this post-pandemic haul, coming out of this time where many people have felt burnt out from the pandemic, or they've just been not burned out, although many people are, but even if you don't feel like you're burned out, or you're running on fumes, or you just have had a trouble even putting one foot in front of the other, which again, if you go back and listen to some past podcasts that I've done, some past episodes, then you'll see this idea that many people have gone through periods of feeling like they're languishing, or maybe they're just dormant. If you've been having any of those kind of feelings, that we know there are people that have been experiencing those things, again, through research and observation and personal experience. But even if you're not somebody that feels like you're languishing, or you have that kind of burnout feeling, we know that the many people have been challenged in ways that they never would have dreamed of. Challenged, that there have been struggles, certainly. And then there's also been the challenges of just trying to navigate this work-life balance. many people in the remote environments that they've been working in. When does the workday begin and when does it end? In a remote environment where you can stack up meeting after meeting after meeting virtually, that when does life, begin and when does it end? You can always be working, you can always be on. And so many places and many people have been challenged by this idea of finding work-life balance. We know this, that there are people that have been feeling these ways. But then we also know that there have been others. There have been others that have realized that they actually love and have thrived in this environment of being able to work remotely, or being able to kind of hit the pause button and step back and reevaluate or re-identify how do they work best, and what are the best elements of how they are most effective, and how do they raise their bar on their performance. And many people have also realized that they love the remote working, they thrive in that kind of environment, and actually the more flexible lifestyle has been a game changer for them, because it's allowed them to be maybe more present to their families, maybe more active in a hobby or a healthy lifestyle that's helped them be healthier as a human being, and at the same time helped them then kind of plan their time and invest their time more in how do they be even more productive in different ways. And so we know this, that there are people that have been having different feelings and experiences along that spectrum. Some that can't wait to get back in a work environment where they are physically in a space and they know their workday begins at a certain time and ends at a certain time, and they have a separate space away from their home and their families and their dogs barking and all of those things, so that they can contain work at work, and then they can leave and go home. We know there are many people that feel that way. But we also know that there are also people that feel the exact opposite. They feel that they have been more effective, they've been more productive, and their life has been more enriched by this ability to work remotely, to be more active in their and more really empowered with their time to be as effective and productive as they can possibly be. And then we know that there are people along that spectrum that fall somewhere in between all of those things. So these are things we know. And we also know that because engaging the mind and hearts of our people is directly connected to performance, we also know that it's going to be critical for us as leaders, teams, and organizations to continue to be proactive about how we engage the minds and hearts of our people. And that is going to require us to think about and be creative and name and plan specific time where we do get everybody in the same space. We do get people in the same room so that we can have those in-person experiences where people can look each other in the eyes. They can have those down conversations where they're learning about each other, where they're building that relationship with one another, and they can feel the power of the same messages and the same energy of everybody in the same room. We know that teams and organizations are going to need to continue to be strategic and intentional about when do we have those in-person experiences. And then we also know that this virtual environment isn't going away. And in fact, the best leaders, teams, and organizations are going to be the ones in the future of work that realize how do we leverage those in-person experiences and make sure that we don't ever lose that humanity, that human touch to being in the same space and hearing those same messages and the energy that comes from aligning our people all in the same room. And then in between those times when we're in person, that we're going to have to continue to get better at leveraging virtual meetings, virtual experiences that aren't just the boring virtual meetings of updates and death by PowerPoint and Excel spreadsheets and just reports, but we're going to have to continue. And one of the things that I've been absolutely encouraged by over the pandemic is the number of virtual environments and virtual meetings and speeches and interactive sessions that I've led with companies around the globe, that the level of engagement and the ways in which we are still learning and showing people how to have productive, engaging, interactive virtual meetings, that we're going to have to continue to leverage that. to engage the minds and hearts of our people, to align people virtually in ways that maybe bridge the gap between those in-person experiences. So we know that. We know all these things. So we're going to have to continue to engage the minds and hearts of people in person and virtually. We also know that our teams, our organizations, and our companies can't lose their sight of their mission, of their objectives, and certainly with results. That nobody, no true leader, team, organization on the planet is going to say that, hey, yeah, we're not going to care about results or goals or performance or any of that anymore. Of course we have to, or else the organizations won't exist. So we know that performance and objectives and results are always going to be important. And yet the key is, the reality is, as we continue to redefine, rediscover, reimagine, and then lead this future of work that's more intentional about the way that we develop people and cultures, our performance will actually increase. There'll be a time, I'm sure we're going to muddle our way through this, and there's going to be some foggy moments and some times where things are certainly uncertain. That's just the time that we're in. But I have no doubt that the teams and organizations that are aligned and are continuing to discover this balance of the future of work, that we will also discover that we will be more effective as leaders, teams, and organizations with those results. And we know that results are always going to be important, that the mission of why we exist is always going to be critical, and the objectives that we have as individuals, teams, and organizations are never going away. And so we need to make sure that we're thriving, that we're growing teams, we're growing leaders, we're growing these cultures proactively in the direction that we want in order to accomplish those goals. So I want to pause here for a second, and let's take a quick break, and then we'll be right back. Take a deep breath, relax your mind, and we'll be right back in just 1 second. Many teams and organizations right now are realizing they need to do both. They need to engage the minds and hearts of their people in person, bring people back together in person, and continue to engage the minds and hearts of their people virtually. So whether you're planning that next event, that power in congregation, the power and the energy that comes from bringing all your people into the same room, into the same space for that important meeting or conference, and you need a powerful keynote speech or facilitated team discussion or facilitated conversation that is the currency for change about leadership, about the culture that you're trying to create together, or the mindset that is needed to navigate all that is in front of you, whether you're planning that in person or you need to do that virtually. I hope that we can be a resource to you and support you in that effort. If so, contact us at jasonvbarger.com, at jasonvbarger.com, if we can partner with you to help engage the minds and hearts of your people in these important times. So we're talking about this navigating the future of work today. And so I'm going to chime in on this topic a little bit and a little bit further. Again, we've already set the stage for this conversation earlier in this episode, but I'm going to chime in on this topic, my own observations and research that is emerging on these, this issue of the future of work, actually over the next 2 episodes, and we're going to be taking kind of 2 different angles. And so these next couple episodes are going to be focused on this idea of the future of work, and all that we're all, every single person that's listening to this is navigating this future of work discussion in some kind of way. But we're going to approach it from 2 different angles on this podcast and the next podcast. Today, we're focusing on the proactive things that many leaders, teams, and companies are doing or can be doing in healthy ways to help their people navigate their way through these changing times. So we're going to focus proactively. What are we doing, or what can we be doing right now in this time of uncertainty as we're rediscovering, reimagining, redefining what this kind of future of work is going to look like on our teams and organizations? What can we be doing right now to help people navigate their way through it? And then on the next episode, we're going to focus on some of the research, some of the trends related to, if you've heard the term, the big shift that's taking place this idea, the tsunami that's taking place, where many people are quitting their jobs in record numbers, where there's going to be this tidal wave that is coming of changing of talent, switching around. And again, you're going to hear me say, this is where culture becomes your greatest competitive advantage. And what we're going to be experiencing, we're going to talk about this again on the next episode, is we're going to talk about some of those research and trends. But the reality is that people are realizing sometimes they're just burnt out, so they're making the decision to quit. But where they're going to land and the way this talent is going to begin to shift and change hands, culture is going to be such a driver in where they land, because people are searching. Again, 9 out of every 10 people are searching for a more meaningful culture. So on the next episode, we'll focus on that research and trends related to the big shift, and kind of the other employee trends, and how we can lead, how we can care for people, and bring our best awareness to these issues. But today, again, proactively, the angle we're talking about is how can we and what can we be doing, and what are some of the best places currently doing in order to navigate this beginning, redefining, rediscovering, and reimagining what that future of work look like. And so proactively, the best teams and organizations, of course, have been stepping back to study the trends. They've been part of the best places out there have been proactively. They've been looking at what are their people saying, what is the environment like, what can we see about the way that people are engaging or not engaging in this whole movement right now around the future of work. That the desires of their people, as well as having great clarity, that is what they are most interested in. And so they're making sure that they have the trends and they're studying the research, but they're also making sure that the desires of their people, that there's what is it that they desire and how they believe their people can be most effective. So they're listening to their people, but they're also looking at the trends and saying, hey, how do we navigate our way through this, and how do we make sure that we are bringing about the best and trying to create a proactive environment where our people can be effective, but they can also feel appreciated, cared for, and in an environment that they can be most effective. Nobody out there has this all figured out. I'll tell you that straight up. Nobody has it all figured out. There is no perfect answer or perfect solution to this. Every team and organization is navigating this on their own. And so your team, your company, organization, again, part of what you're going to hear me say is proactively what the best places are doing right now is they're diving into that process. And with their people, they are reimagining, rediscovering, or redefining what it's going to look like for them. And every team and organization is going to have to figure out what authentically works for them, this balance of remote work, in-person work. How are we going to care for each other and continue to be committed to growing meaningful cultures? That is going to be an individual and a team and organization by organization decision that is going to be made. So nobody has it all figured out, but eventually strategies need to be deployed. Strategies need to be deployed. So we can't just step back and study research forever and just listen to our people forever without action. We're going to need to look at the trends, look at the research, listen to our people. Some of the best companies out there are going on these kind of listening tours where they're engaging their people on what they think would be best and the best environments for their effectiveness. But at the end of the day, they can't just listen forever. They're going to have to continue to listen, but they're going to have to begin to deploy strategies. And so here are some keys, some key strategies and some key things that healthy teams and leaders and organizations are doing right now. This doesn't mean they have it all figured out, but these are actual things they're doing proactively in order to navigate their way through this kind of future of work conversation. One, you already heard me say it, but they are listening to their people. They're listening to their people. So it's not just the leaders up in some room by themselves, a small group of people that are making, quick decisions about, hey, what's best, or some strict policy about this is the way we're going to be in person or remote or anything in between. It's going to come from first listening to their people. And so the best leaders, teams, and organizations are creating environments to listen and try to gauge where do their employees and where do their people feel like they're going to be most effective, and how are we going to balance this kind of back to work in person and remote setting, what is needed in order to keep our mission out in front of us. But they're doing all of this by listening to their people so that everybody is a participant and a co-creator in that. That doesn't mean that it's just by democracy. It doesn't mean decisions that are made is that we just go by consensus. But it does mean that the best leaders, teams, and organizations are involving their people, listening to their people, what it is that they want. And then down the line, they have to make decisions based on that data and that research and that engagement that they've had with their people. So the first thing they're doing is they're listening to their people. The second thing they're doing is they're staying focused on mission and outcomes. Again, in the midst of one, you got to be listening to your people. What is it that you want? But at the same time, the best leaders, teams, and organizations are also being clear and committed and staying focused on what is our mission, whatever the mission is of your organization, to make sure that is out in front of people. And also to make sure that we don't lose sight of what are the outcomes that we are driving towards. What are the outcomes? Because we got to make sure that in this conversation about remote work, coming back into space, all of the things, work-life balance, all of those things that are critical, again, to creating these meaningful work environments, we need to make sure that also in the midst of that, at the heart of that decision also is, what is our mission? Why do we exist? And what are the outcomes that we are pushing towards? So that then we can be as smart about the working environments that's going to help care for people and also help us to be most effective towards, moving closer to that mission and those outcomes. So one is we got to listen to our people. Two is that we got to stay focused on mission and outcomes. Three, we have to also commit to a trial period. Some of the smartest things that I've watched leaders and companies do is to say they haven't made these bold statements or these, grandiose things about, hey, this is how it's going to be forever. Is they've just said, hey, there's a trial period. This is what we're going to do over the next 6 months, the next 9 months, the next 12 months, whatever that period is. But we're going to commit to this. And we know that it may not be perfect for everybody, but here's where we're going to commit to a trial period. And you know what? Then we're going to step back and we're going to reevaluate. And so this idea of making sure that they're committing to a trial period, because a lot of this, as we know, those of us that have studied change theory, we know that change is difficult for people. So any change is going to be difficult. And so being able to give people, hey, here's clearly what we're going to do, and we're going to try, but we're also going to be willing to reevaluate. And we're going to continue to adapt and continue to make this better the way that every process, that's the way that every process exists in the world anyway. So 1, listen to your people. 2, stay focused on mission and outcomes. 3, commit to a trial period. 4, we have to embrace and acknowledge this idea of change. You just heard me say it. But the reality is that leading change is a process that never stops. And so people are feeling a sense of more things changing around them because so much in the world has felt uncertain. And so their nerves are exposed. Their heightened senses of change are more right in front of their face. And so their nerves are more exposed. But we need to continue to educate people and also help this be clear that, hey, we're navigating our way through change. We're leading the proactive change that we want. And so we're not going to figure it out all in one jump, but we are together going to continue to embrace the way things are changing, acknowledge that things are changing, and then together say, hey, we are committed to continue to make things better and find better ways, solutions to make this more effective and better for all of us. But it starts with us embracing and acknowledging change. And so lastly, after we listen to our people, we stay focused on mission and outcomes, we commit to a trial period, we embrace and acknowledge the idea and the reality of change. Then 5th is we have to create space to engage the minds and hearts of our people. So those environments don't just magically happen. We have to make sure that we create times, again, in person, very strategically. When are we going to do this over this trial period, or certainly over the next year? When is it that we're going to leverage the time to be in person, engage the minds and hearts of our people, get everybody aligned and looking in the same direction together in person? And also, how are we going to be strategic about leveraging those virtual experiences, virtual opportunities in between in-person sessions, so that we can make sure that we are engaging the minds of our people? Because conversations are the currency for change. So we need to, along this path, we can't just say, hey, we'll reevaluate this in 6 months, 12 months, or whatever. You won't hear from us until then. We need to make sure that we are continuously, strategically, proactively engaging the minds and hearts of our people along the way. So those are just a few keys that I'll share with you today of things that I've not only studied, researched, observed, experienced, that the healthiest leaders, teams, and organizations are doing right now in order to navigate their way through this kind of future of work. They are, 1, listening to their people. They're 2, they're staying focused on mission and outcomes. 3, they're committed to a trial period. 4, they are embracing and acknowledging the reality of change. And 5, they are creating space proactively to engage the minds and hearts of their people in person and virtually to have those conversations that are the currency for change. I'll remind you, this is research that came out, 58% of performance, 58% of all performance is directly tied to our emotional intelligence, our EQ. And on future episodes in this season, we're going to be diving into more emotional intelligence, EQ topics. But 58% of performance is tied to EQ, which means, again, most of our performance, most of it, is not just about our intellect, our IQ. It's not just about our experience, our past experience, or our personality type. Actually, most of it then, yes, we all have intellect we bring to a situation. We all have past experiences that we draw from. We all have unique personalities that we bring to the table every single time. But then 58% of our performance is tied to how do we manage our own emotions and create a plan for how we navigate our own emotions, and then how are we socially aware of the emotions and manage the relationships of the people around us. And so 58% of our performance is tied to emotional intelligence, which means how we navigate our way through redefining, reimagining, rediscovering this future of work is directly tied to our own awareness, our own ability to listen, and also then our ability to respond and build relationships with the people around us. So as always, I want to leave you with some questions to ponder for today's episode. Have you brought your people into participation, into dialogue, and listen to them? Have you brought your people, as you navigate your way through this conversation around the future of work, have you brought your people into participation, into dialogue, to listen to them? And if not, maybe it's time to think about, when do you do that? Is the mission or the outcomes clear to your team or throughout your organization? So in the midst of listening and bringing them into dialogue and participation, is the mission and the outcomes, are those clear? And lastly, are you committed to a trial period? A period to say, hey, here's the direction we're going to head after we've listened, after we've done the research, and oh, by the way, we've kept the mission and outcomes in front of us. Here's a trial period that we're going to be committed to, and then we're going to step back and reevaluate it, and we're going to continue to make our work environment, the meaningful culture that we're creating together, we're going to continue to make it better and better over time. On the next episode, I hope you'll tune in next time. For our next episode, we're going to focus more on the research and the trends related to this quote-unquote big shift as it relates to the future of work. And then how do we lead in the midst of an environment where people may be quitting, or we may be trying to attract or retain or grow existing talent? What are some of the trends showing us? And then how do we stay thoughtful, intentional about how we show up and lead and the culture that we create in order to build and create that meaningful work environment? Remember, the best leaders, teams, and cultures on the planet continue to stimulate progress by recalibrating their thermostat together.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using. And share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to your organization, or you have a question or comment about this podcast, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we all are ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.